Before you spend $100,000 on a hi-fi, spend $1,000 on your room. It's better to have a $1,000 hi-fi and $1,000 room treatment than a $1 million hi-fi. Look, I'm a pianist too, and I get invited around the world to play, and sometimes I go into these homes that are just crazy after a concert for a party, and they have a $1 million hi-fi system in there. And I've seen a lot of them, and they're in these beautiful marble rooms with glass walls, and all bets are off. They just look great, but they don't sound, they're unlistenable. So what's the point?
The Fidelity Exchange. Real conversations for people who take listening seriously.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Fidelity Exchange. I'm Drew Baird, founder of Moon Audio, and today I'm sitting down with a true pioneer and a legendary figure in the world of high-fidelity audio. As a composer, musician, and the co-founder of Chesky Records, he spent decades building an absolute institution for audiophiles, setting the gold standard for how acoustic music should be captured and experienced. He's also a visionary who refuses to sit still, constantly pushing the boundaries of technology to change how we hear the world. David, welcome to the Fidelity Exchange. Really glad to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So maybe take us way back to the beginning. Sort of, where did the love of music and recording actually start for you?
Well, I played 8 seasons with the Green Bay Packers, tight end, and then I got hurt. And I needed something to do because I couldn't play anymore. Anyway, that's not true, but I'm sure you've never started a video off like that, so we're doing it. Look, I've been a musician since 5. My parents made me play piano. As a matter of fact, everybody in my house had to take piano lessons. And my older brother's a doctor. He plays for fun. And for some reason, it just took with me, and that's it. I became a musician. And that's all from there. It's all I ever wanted to do. And then I got involved in audio because when I was a teenager, I was a studio musician and I was around all these microphones, and that was cool. And I got really hooked on that back in the day. And when I started doing it, it was all tube microphones. And I was so dumb at the age of 15 that I didn't realize it was all U47s and 67s around me. Had I bought those for $5 probably back then, I'd be a zillionaire today.
Oh, they'd be worth a fortune now, huh?
Yeah.
So when you were building Chesky Records into an audiophile institution, what was the driving mission? What did you feel was missing in the industry?
Well, it's simple. I started my off as a studio conductor, okay? And I would stand in front of an orchestra. And, back in the days when John Williams and Star Wars was happening, I used to do TV shows and jingles. And they couldn't afford John Williams. I would get hired and I would do these big symphonic scores. And I would sit in front of the orchestra and I said, wow, this is amazing. It's the best seat in the house. The violins, everything images perfectly. And then I would hear it back and it would sound really messed up because they would do it with like 100 microphones because it was for TV and movies and whatever. And they had to have all those things, multi-mic for cues. And I said to myself, if I ever did a label, I would want it from the perspective of a conductor or the audience where you're there. And that's how I got the idea for Chesky Records as a one mic perspective. And our entire career with Chesky was always been from the perspective of one microphone. Whether it was a stereo mic, binaural mic, or anything, it was one perspective. Now, things have changed now because we'll get into that later with DSP, and now it's a hobby, but, that's how it started.
But, with all the different enveloping music that you did with binaural and, some of the really cool tracks that I've listened to that you set up for headphones and whatnot, I mean, that was from one microphone or you started to play around with things?
No, one microphone. Look, here's how we start. Our early recordings were done with an AKG C24, which is binaural. It's 2 capsules like this, and it's binaural. And that's like the best for imaging. It's like perfect razor imaging. Then from there, we moved over to a sound field microphone, which is 4 capsules, and then you matrix them later, MS and things like that, mid-side. And then we moved into the dummy head, the binaural recordings for a while. We did that. And that was kind of our evolution. Now with the binaural, playing it back with crosstalk cancellation, it is the most real. But the problem with binaural is everybody's fingerprint is different and everybody's ear is different. So your pinna has to match the pinna of that dummy head. If it doesn't, all bets are off. But if it does, it's the best roller coaster ride in audio. With the with the filters put in to cancel the crosstalk.
So you eventually made the decision to sell the label. Walk through that choice. What led to that moment?
Well, I had partners and they just wanted to retire, and that's it. Simple as that. They had enough and they weren't musicians, and that's it. So I started a new label. It's my retirement label, and it's just to have fun and do crazy things that I could never do with a lot of DSP and try to create new ways to make recordings, and it's an experimental tool. It's sort of like, my shed in the back of the house. And what I'm doing now is trying to get beyond the 60-degree triangle with DSP. Remember when I had Chesky Records 40 years ago, we didn't have digital signal processing. It was just all live, one shot. Now we can do all kinds of things with computers, and it's very simple. Why walk up to the 20th floor when you could take the elevator? So with all these tools available, my thing now is to try to get out of the 60-degree triangle. I want to do two things. First of all, I want to have the most natural tone I can have, because I don't care if you're a violinist, cellist, or if you're a rock and roll guitarist. It's about your tone. People practice all day long to get a great tone. And with this tone, that's the poetry of music. So I want to capture a great tone. So I've switched over now to ribbon mics and custom-made ribbon tube microphones, because it's a very natural tone. With condenser microphones, they're round like a tambourine, and they want to ring, and they ring in the audio band. Ribbons don't. So it's a very natural mid-range. Now, a lot of people don't like it because people in high-end audio don't want reality. They want hyper-reality. They want neon lights. They want fluorescent lights. If I'm looking at your shirt there and in real life, I could see all the detail without anything jumping out. So I wanted to go to the ribbons to get a very natural sound. And then the other thing I want to do is expand the 60-degree triangle, because with head transfer function, we cannot hear past 60 degrees. Now, let's go into this for a second. There's a thing on the internet called the McGurk effect. It's an audio-visual, how we're hardwired as people. If you go to the McGurk effect, there's a guy saying the word ba, ba, ba. Then he says the word va, va, va. Then, when he's saying the word ba, they're superimposing his mouth going va. And you would bet your life that he's saying va when he's saying ba, because the brain, the eye, trumps the ear. And the eye says, hey, he's doing the V sound. So you cannot do that. The same thing happens in audio because you have interaural crosstalk corruption. So you cannot hear outside of the 60-degree triangle, but there's sound outside of there, but the brain cannot hear it. Because what happens is this. You hit a bass drum on the left side of the orchestra. It has to hit your ear, go around your nose, and hit the other ear. So the brain auto-locates by two things. It takes longer to go around your nose and get to the other ear. So that affects the one thing, and also the level's lower. So by the level and the timing, the brain says, oh, that's where it is. And the brain says, oh, there's a bear 100 meters behind me that's going to eat me. And that's how we auto-locate, because it's in our nature that we hear like this, 360 degrees. Problem with a speaker is when you're playing a hi-fi system, the left ear hears the left and right speaker at the same time, and vice versa. The brain gets all discombobulated, so you cannot hear outside that triangle. What we're doing in partnership in physics lab at Princeton University with Dr. Edgar Choueiri, with the Bach labs, is they've created crosstalk cancellation filters that cancel the interaural crosstalk. And then you can hear in the 360 mode out of two speakers standing next to each other. Now, for the Audiophile Society, my new label, I have a light version like that, because for the Bach to work, you need a decoder. And it works best with binaural decoded. And then you're in like a Star Trek holograph. But for what I've done is figured out why we hear like this, enabled with DSP to have a lot of this functionality to get beyond the 60-degree triangle to like 180. So when you hear the Audiophile Society's recordings, it's just this massive soundstage right in front of you. Boom, because all the phase relationships are correct and the timings, and there's things in there that make the brain think it's a bigger space.
So this isn't built into the recording, though. You've got to do it in DSP. So how are consumers going to be able to reap the benefits of this?
So two things. If you buy it Audiophile Society recording, it's baked into it, okay? But I bake it in light, okay? I don't like to deceive people. My thing is a light version because it's baked in. To really hear what this is capable of anything, you need to go to Bach Labs, BACCH Labs, and they have a decoder which you have to buy, and then it decodes the process. But for people who don't want to lay out the money, I'm doing all my recordings like that, expanding them. Just figuring out how humans hear and what are the cues that make us think we're hearing outside the 60-degree triangle.
So tell me more about the limitations of traditional stereo. Why do we need to get outside that 60-degree triangle? And what is the triangle for people that don't understand?
Well, it's 30 degrees off axis. Look, most records in the world are mixed for two speakers in front of you, 30 degrees off axis. And that's how you mix a record. And like I said, with the McGurk effect, you can't hear past that. It's impossible to hear past the 60-degree triangle unless you manipulate the phase. So what we're trying to do is put things in the recording to get outside that, to make it more immersive. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. It's a magician's trick. I swear to you, when you hear a recording back, there's no musician in those two boxes in front of you. We have to create the illusion. It's an illusion that there's people there. Now, you know what? Everything goes in audio. You could do whatever you want. My thing with the Audiophile Society is the illusion of space. I want the sound field to be massive. You can walk into it. It has great depth. It is just like, whoa, overwhelming. That is my personal thing when I want to do this. Now, what everybody else wants to do is another thing, and that's okay. So that's what I want to do, is to create these large sonic, landscapes.
So you're leveraging DSP. I think we talked about a little bit of AI, HRTF to push the envelope. How do these technologies help create something more immersive and true to life?
Well, you learn how to use them. They're tools, and you create. They're paintbrushes. That's all they are. It's by adding reverbs. Look, if we walked into a cave and we clapped our hands, you would know you're in a cave, right? Because of the length of the reverb. We would know we're in a church. We're in a small room. By adding these things in, we can fake the brain out to think you're in these spaces, Now, the problem is this: with the crosstalk corruption, you can't fill in the back like you can. Like if you listen to a Bach playback decoder, you'll hear things behind your head all over. It's crazy. It's crazy. But what I can do is, for a cheap roller coaster ride, is get it out to about, 180 degrees, and it gets there. But I can't get behind your head, because I say to myself, I said, what kind of things do people hear that make them think they're in this large space? How does the phase work? How does the reverbs work? So by doing this, I paint this picture, this illusion, and it just makes it a better roller coaster ride. That's all.
So when you look at the next generation, you raised a great question on our first call. Who is actually going to care about sound quality moving forward? Tell us more about what you're thinking in that comment.
Well, that's a good question, because most people hear music on a phone. And, look, my daughter has a really good singing career now. She's just played a concert last night, flew to LA. She's all over the place. She was raised with quad 57s in the living room, and she listens to them, and she has a hi-fi system. We have them all over the house. But she comes to me and says, "Dad, this record doesn't sound right." And I said, "You're listening on an iPhone." And she says, "Yes, because everybody who's going to listen to my record is going to listen on an iPhone." And that's where we are today. Back in the days when I started, we didn't have video games. We didn't have iPhones. People wanted a cool hi-fi system. So that was the thing. But today, audio is on the background. It's not in the forefront. We have to get kids into this. Now, my other son, Luca, he's got a speaker company. He's 18 years old at Carnegie Mellon, and he's building speakers for young people, and he's trying to get them in. And when kids go to his dorm room and they hear his speakers, they're like blown away. They've never heard it because there's nowhere to experience it. Where does a kid go walking down the street in New York anyway? There's no hi-fi shops anywhere. It's an abstraction. It's not that they don't like it. They're just not exposed to it. Might as well be from Mars. But when they hear it, and they're like, wow, this is the coolest thing. So as an electronics industry, they need to get on these college campuses and bring these hi-fi systems there and let the kids play the music they like, which is not my thing, and then they hear it on a big system and they say, wow, you know something? If I pulled out my iPhone, we could watch Star Wars, right? Not a problem. It's still not the same experience as watching in an IMAX movie. That's the whole thing. So it's still the same story, but it's a different experience. If we want to keep high-end audio going, we have to get people in, and we have to get them into systems they can afford. Like my son's speakers are like $900 or $1,800 or something like that for each different model, but they're affordable. It's not unobtainium like the $100,000 systems and up. So if kids get into it when they get older, instead of buying that Ferrari for $300,000, they buy an audio system for $50,000 or $60,000. So that's how you do it. But the thing is, it's like classical music. You got to get them into the concert halls. You need to expose them. So the main thing for the hi-fi industry is to keep the demographics lower. You have to bring in younger people. You just can't have it for billionaires that are, 90 years old.
Yeah, it's been a constant gripe, I'd say, maybe for like the last 20 years at all the audio shows. Where are the young people? Where are the young people? And several weeks ago, I was at Record Store Day, and I've been posing these questions to a lot of record store owners. I'm like, who's coming in and buying the stuff in here? And, at this one particular shop, School Kids Records here in Raleigh, they also sell a ton of used CDs. And he said that used CD sales in the last year have doubled. And I'm like, why do you think that is? And we sort of both put our minds together and we're like, you know what? The younger crowd are now buying their first cars. And like when I was a kid, when I bought my first clunker, well, it didn't come with a CD player and it came with a tape deck. And so now the kids are buying clunkers that have, CD players in it. And they're like, hey man, I want to put some CDs in these slots. And so they're buying up CDs like crazy for that reason. And then they're also buying vinyl, not just for the perspective of playing vinyl on a turntable, but they're looking at it as a nostalgia and sort of a retro thing. And they're actually hanging it on their walls and they're really getting into the album artwork. And my daughters finally said to me in this last year, they said, you got to get me a turntable. I've got all these records on my walls and no way to listen to them. So those are two interesting things that are really getting young people back into it. But yeah, I mean, one of the biggest problems too is that these audio shows, the systems are so expensive. No kid can afford it. And why are they going to go to the show to see equipment they can't afford? They need to do some less expensive rooms at these shows,
Yeah, well, look, my kid's room at the last show was like with the speakers, it was like $3,500 for everything. So it's affordable. It's still not cheap, but the reality is this: we need to make it desirable. My kid can't afford a Ferrari or a Maserati or a Lamborghini, but rest assured he would love it because every kid wants it. It's because it's a cool thing. So the thing is, how do we make somebody want a really nice hi-fi rig saying, hey, when I make a lot of money, that is what I want? That's important as well. But we need to stress, look, maybe this comes down to the arts, music, I don't know. But the reality is we need to get young people into this sport, as we say.
So it seems like your son's blazing the trail for the next generation, which is really cool. I love to hear that. That's awesome.
Well, you know what's important? It's if I came out with a speaker like his, nobody cares. Young people, you know what? If an older person
you
got
see
on
a young person doing it,
yes, young people. It's just like if they go to a concert. If a young kid played Bob Dylan songs on a stage to other 18-year-old kids, they would totally dig it. But if Bob Dylan came out in his 80s and played, they would be like, okay, but it's just not the same. People want to be with their peers. So if peers say, hey, this is cool, I got these speakers, check it out, everybody wants that. And that's what my kid is trying to do is, he's hitting his head against the wall because it's not a base that's, open to this. They have to be educated as well, but he's doing it. And we're going to go to the Vienna Hi-Fi show in 2 weeks, and there'll be a lot of young people. It's a good thing to have young designers. We're meeting a few young people, and it's important for the industry, to go, because as I see it, I see the industry getting more expensive, shrinking, and older and richer people selling less things, more money, and to be healthy, you need those, like in the old days, the Dyna 70 amps and, all the intro things that people could just have great sound and not break the bank. If you spend $3,000-$4,000, I go like this. If a plasma TV or whatever they're selling now, LEDs, a nice one's $3,000-$4,000. people can wrap their head around a $3,000 or $4,000 stereo. But when the TV is 3 or 4,000 and the hi-fi is 400,000 and the cables are another 200,000, that's a thing that's, it's like, it stuns people. So the idea is to have things in the range of these nice TVs, and then people can wrap their head around it, and still it's affordable. A teacher or a professor can afford a few $1,000s for an amazing rig at 3 or 4,000, but they're not going to spend the $500,000. And then you just have hi-fi for guys who own hedge funds. So that's not good either.
So let's talk about what you're building now. What exactly is the Audiophile Society, and what is the core focus of what you're working on there?
The Audiophile Society is my fishing boat. Okay, it's like I'm retired and I want to go fishing, and I just want to play and have a great time and experiment in the studio, do all the craziest things I can to make things sound better. That's all I want to do. I also want to give a lot of young people an opportunity to, record. And we have a lot of young artists on the label, which is great because it gives them a chance as well. You just can't keep reissuing Miles Davis Kind of Blue in every format in the whole world. I mean, it starts to get stupid, So that's pretty much it. It's a play toy for me to see what we could do at 192 with all this DSP and to create these beautiful recordings with these massive spaces that you can walk into. People drop their jaw. And that's kind of what it is. It's my play toy. It's golf. It's fishing and golf.
Are there any current or upcoming projects or unique recordings you're working on right now that you can share with us?
Well, we have in next week's coming out Morale Coriel, Larry Coriel's son, a great blues musician with some great players on there. The bass player from Bob Dylan's band on there, but Morale is a young guy. And we have Bernard Purdy, the famous drummer. So we have that. In the fall, we have, who's coming out? We have a great songwriter, Philip Namenworth. We just put out this amazing singer from Colombia, Patricia Moreno, just guitar and voice, and that was great, So we're just doing all these crazy things. You know what I'm doing too? I just did an electronic synthesizer record. It's called Music of the Spheres. And the idea is this, it's our first foray into trying to really do 3D out of two speakers. And it's kind of cool because we can get the sounds to come out really in front of the speakers in front of you, by using these things. So that's going to be our first in this new thing with this, we keep updating the gear and we keep learning. And we're trying to say, like, how can we pan things and make them sound like they're not flat in space. So this is kind of cool because we have things in the back and we think, and we could always do that, but now we have things that kind of come out, which is really cool.
So tell us about some of the places you're modeling for recordings. Are you trying to imitate venues like Carnegie Hall or something like that in terms of the presentation of what's going on in the music as well?
No, we don't use regular. Look, if it's a symphony, we want to put it in the symphony hall. It doesn't have to be Carnegie, because the reality is if you close your eyes and you're in Carnegie Hall, the Vienna Philharmonic or Boston Symphony Halls, you can't tell the difference. You don't know these halls unless you play there every day as a musician or your conductor. But the idea is we want the space to be proper. So if we have a guy plays blues, we want to put him in a nice blues club. If we have a symphony, I want to put him in the symphony hall. With these electronic things, we put them in these crazy large spaces to just have a good time, Look, there's the reality. It's sort of like painting. You have your Dutch flower painters, and then you have the abstract impressionists, So to a guy who paints, flowers all day, when they see Jackson Pollock, it's like, what is this? So we want to do our Jackson Pollock with electronics, AI, and all this just to have fun, create these sounds and see what we can do.
So what are some of the Audiophile Society releases so far that you're most excited for people to hear? And I'm assuming you can just purchase and download from the website?
Yeah, well, look, we have a girl, Noga. She's fantastic. It's just two guitars and vocal, really simple and beautiful. We have, my daughter's on there with her record, what's her record called? Memory. She's doing really well. It's high up on the charts and she's touring, but that's a really nice natural group. And Drummond's a good one. We have one that's really amazing. It's called Cafe. It's a Brazilian record, Amazonas de Floresta, but that's something that is really 3D as well. I mean, you put the record on and your room is transformed into a jungle in the Amazon, and the walls disappear. I mean, that's a record that really can get the walls to disappear and everything gets to go away, and you're just in front of this massive soundstage with sound on the sides of you, you know?
So where is all this heading in the long run? What do you want people to walk away knowing about the future of and where you're taking all of this?
You know, we don't. We just want them to, first of all, we sign up for the newsletter because we always post things about how to make your stereo sound better. We also have this amazing test disc for headphones and a test disc for speakers to set them up correctly. So that's two things we have that people should all have because 95% of the homes I walk into, the hi-fis are set up terribly. They just don't have a clue. And even in dealers, there's not set up well, and even in hi-fi shows. So it's a good tool to have. But the thing is to be curious. I mean, look, we're not trying to reissue things from 1950. If that's your thing, we're not for you. But if you have an open mind and you want to try new recordings of new artists with new techniques that sound really sonic spectaculars, that's kind of what we do.
Very cool, very cool. There's so much talent out in that world, and it's so hard to sift through it all. I mean, you often hear the same artists at all the Grammys and whatnot, and it's such a disappointment that there are just so many amazing smaller groups out there and artists that you never even hear about. So it sounds really cool that you're probably going to have a lot of people that folks probably haven't heard of, but really cool experimental and exotic DSP three-dimensional sounds that they really need to check out.
Yeah, it's fun, and we haven't it's normal music, like, Noga's it's music of Paul Simon, the Beatles, it's just beautiful folk music, and, like I said, all these other things, we have a lot of great jazz, a lot of great classical, and they're just look, I wanna record naturally, like I said, I don't like this hyped up sound. I know it's very impressive for 2 or 3 minutes, but it's not that. If I was in a room with somebody talking, I don't sound like I don't have that hype. It just doesn't exist in real life. But recordings, it's like at 10 kilohertz, it's plus 10. They put these rising top ends, and then you have some of these phono cartridges that have rising top ends, and it's just this treble. Like, where does this come from? It's sort of like somebody putting headlights in front of you, shining on you. It's just too much. I want to go for a more pastel, beautiful, natural sound.
And when you say people are setting their hi-fi gear up wrong, can you tell us what you're seeing that they're doing wrong?
A lot of people don't put it in a 60-degree triangle because recordings are made like that, but that's cool. If you want to have your speakers by the window and you want to sit in the other end of the room, that's your prerogative too. But if you want to hear what's on the record, it should be a 60-degree triangle. You should have damping on the walls, damping on the floor, 50%, and you should go in there and clap your hands. You shouldn't hear flutter echoes. You need this way you can you're not hearing the hi-fi in the room, you're hearing the hi-fi. The idea is to get the room out of the equation. People, before you spend $100,000 on a hi-fi, spend $1,000 on your room. It's better to have a $1,000 hi-fi in $1,000 room treatment than a $1 million hi-fi. Look, I'm a pianist too, and I get invited around the world to play, and sometimes I go into these homes that are just crazy after a concert for a party, and they have $1 million hi-fi system in there. And I've seen a lot of them, and they're in these beautiful marble rooms with glass walls, and all bets are off. They just look great, but they don't sound they're unlistenable. So what's the point? You have to have that room.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I try to tell people all the time, look at your room first before you do anything. Um, well, last question. Let's talk about some music. What are you listening to right now? Obviously, I know you're really high on your on what your daughter does, and that's great. But what are some really cool artists out there that you're really high on right now?
I don't really know because, I'm a composer. I'm working on an opera. I have a concert coming up. I got to go on tour. So I pretty much work on my own thing. I mean, I hear things here and there, but, I kind of live in my own bubble. I mean, I hear things, on the web, but I can't recall anything out now. But look, there's a lot of great little artists out there, and you just hear them. I wish I had that total recall, but I don't. I like this kid, Jacob Collier, what he's doing, because he's getting young kids into good music with good harmony. You have a lot of rappers where it's very basic, but Jacob Collier is very sophisticated, and he's exposing kids to harmony in music, which they don't have in their rap.
David, this is awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Really, really good information. Everybody needs to definitely check out the Audiophile Society. So everyone watching, we're going to put links down below to the Audiophile Society, and David's latest projects are in the description below as well. Go look at what this man is building next. If this conversation moved you at all, please make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming. We've got a lot more of these in the pipeline with people who are doing something real in the music world. David, thanks again. And we'll see everybody next time on the Fidelity Exchange.